I've got a confession to make.
I need to get this off my chest. As a business owner, we all make mistakes.
I've got to confess.
Hey guys, it's time for another episode of Confessions of a Business Owner. Today, I am very fortunate to be joined by someone I call a dear friend, Barry Magliarditi of the Game Changers. Now, Barry is what I would describe as a peak performance or high performance coach for business owners. He's also done many great things, such as achieving a 2 Club win there as well, for those of you that would understand the ClickFunnels world. How you doing over there, Barry?
Mate, I'm fantastic. Thanks, Charlie. How are you?
I'm really well. I'm really looking forward to this episode. I feel like we've had many discussions on the topic we're going to be bringing up today, which is team. So you all set for this episode?
Mate, I'm pumped. Ready to go.
How could you not be? I mean, team is just one of these essential things that I think all business owners have to cross at some point. So we're going to get straight into it. And I've got a question here that I'm really interested to get your answer on, is that what do you actually think the most important thing is when it comes to building a team?
Oh, God. Making sure that you're clear on why you want to build a team in the first place.
That is a really good answer.
Not building a team for the sake of team.
So can you go into that a little bit more? Is there a story behind that?
Yeah, look, I remember many years ago when I started coaching, I got through my first year and I'd made about $928,000 in my first year of coaching. And life was good. You know, I would often take myself out for lunch and movies because at the time, most of my friends would work. So I would have all this time free in the day. And I met this woman and it kind of felt like I'd ticked all the boxes in my life. And that was the best and worst thing that ever happened to me, because it was the best thing because I felt like I'd finally achieved everything that I'd been looking for in life. But it was the worst thing because all of a sudden I felt unfulfilled. And I felt that my role as a coach, I could help a lot more people. And so I remember being quite conflicted, to be honest, for around 6 months, because I wanted to help a lot more people. But I knew that in the process, in order to do that, I had to build a team. Yet my experience of building a team was one 8 years ago after I went bankrupt for $1.3 million. I had a team of 15 full-time employees and 4 contractors. And the whole kind of bit behind going bankrupt was after me and my partner at the time had a disagreement. She decided that she was going to pack up, take the kids and move back to WA. We were in Tasmania at the time. And said that if I wanted to join her, I could, but it meant that I had to leave the business. And I thought, well, you know, I've spent all this time, all this money, I built this team, I can leave the business. And I tried to leave the business, but what I'd effectively done is just built myself a full-time job. I built an organization that required me to be there most of the time, 80 hours a week for the thing to operate. And the moment that I left or that I stepped out, the whole thing fell apart, even though I had, you know, those 14, 15 staff plus the contractors. So, you know, it really took me a long time to deliberating, well, okay, I want to make this, you know, I want to grow this wildly successful company and help millions of people around the world, but how can I do it without building a team? And, you know, the fact is, I don't think it's possible as a solopreneur to impact that many people without having some form of a team.
That's a really good answer. And I think you've kind of, you know, looping in or digging deeper. This is something I see a lot, is some people, when they build a team, are really just building an extension of themselves.
Yeah.
So they're multiplying their own effort at the same time, though, kind of building themselves into whatever they've created. And then the other version of that is when we build a team separate to us. So this is a business, or I suppose a way of looking at it is like, you know, we might build ourselves a job with an extension of ourselves with the team. We might build ourselves a business where the team works for the business and then we separately own that business. And I think it's a really important distinction. But I can only imagine at the time after that experience, I certainly would be hesitant to building a team again. And I know that's something you've gone into and are currently still doing and persisting to grow more. What got you over the line to wanting to build a team again? Is it that belief?
Look, I think it was 6 months of procrastination. Like anyone that knows me knows that I don't procrastinate. And so that was an incredibly painful period of my life. And it got to the point where I realized, well, and I think actually part of it was sabotage. There was part of me that was sabotaging in going back to build a team because, you know, like I had the money, I had the girl, I had the life, and I didn't know how to have that. So it was almost in going back into a business and building a team was a sabotage to take me away from what I'd achieved and what a lot of people would see as success in life. And it was almost that kind of thing, is that once you've burnt the bridge and once you jump in, like I'm the sort of guy that once I start something, I've got to see it through to completion. So as much of a painful experience as that's been over the last 7 years, it's been one of the greatest experiences of my life, because I now have a team that pretty much operates without me. Like I can leave the business can operate autonomously, we can deliver results for our clients, we can generate leads, we can make sales, things can happen without me being involved. And it's quite a feat to sit at this end looking back. And we were just chatting before briefly, like the job's never done. Like being a business owner, the job's never done. There's always something that you want to make better, or you have something you want to refine, or some sort of fight to put out. But I think it was just once I decided, well, stuff that I'm going all in, I was going to make it work one way or another.
I love that. I love that a lot. The determination. It's so very cool. So I'll lead into another side of things there, because I wonder how you feel about this. For me, a big reason on why I have a team and why I like working in a team is I enjoy the team experience. Like I don't enjoy being a solopreneur. So I don't think there's an option for me. For you, it sounds like you could go either way though.
Mate, I could definitely go either way. And this is why, I talk about the love-hate relationship, is that, I always loved the idea and what kept the team around. Because don't get me wrong, there's been a number of times over the last 3 years that I thought, I should just pack it all up and do it on my own. I'd make a lot more money doing it by myself. But that's a very arrogant and narrow-minded way of looking at things, because one of the favorite parts of my week is actually our Tuesday Wigs meeting, where, we jump on a Zoom call, we run a virtual team. We've got team all around Australia, all over the Philippines. And that's probably one of my favorite times of the week, to connect in with everyone, to share our wins, share our successes, look at where we've got issues in the business, and look at ways to overcome them. But I don't like having to do with a team every day. I don't want to be involved in that, and that was probably the biggest change that I made was around 8 months ago, when I hired a general manager or an integrator, I call them, where they manage the team. They manage the day-to-day operations. They manage, the fires, all that sort of stuff. And so my core communication is with her. And my PA. My PA manages my flights, my accommodations, my emails, my appointments, all that sort of stuff. And the only time that I've got to kind of really be involved in the team is during that weekly meeting. And if I choose to interact with them outside of that, because outside of that, they are self-sufficient with the structures I've put in place. And for me, as much as I can jump on stage and speak for a week without any slides, I'm actually heavily introverted. And so I find that what I found is that I couldn't be executing on projects and running a business, executing on projects, moving the business forward and running a team. Like there was a massive conflict in my system. It was wearing me out. I was constantly depleted of energy, of passion, of love. And the last few months since we've really started to kind of kick things off, it's been the most incredible experience, because I've got my weeks now to execute on large projects and do the creative stuff and, be client facing. But I've also still got that mix of team that I can jump on the phone with one of my team, do some mentoring, do some coaching, and see the result and impact that has in the business. But it's not reliant of me. Like I suppose, one thing that I've always striving for is how can I become the most unreliable employee in my company? Like how can I become the most unreliable to where I'm the worst person to come to for advice or come to get something done?
That is such an interesting mindset. And I see where you're going with it. We won't take that out of context. Obviously, I can understand a listener would be thinking what, they're at that point. But it's really making yourself obsolete to the business. Yeah. It's making other people in the business a far better option than you. And I don't think business owners think about that enough at all. Yeah. And I also really like the way you're describing making the team fun for you. Because I've experienced both those camps. Back in my days of running a marketing agency, I used to joke and say I ran an adult daycare. Because I felt like I was just responsible for every single one of my team members, and everyone was directly with me. And it was quite challenging and very draining, much in the same experience you've described. But these days I have my own GM. I have Lisa. Lisa, you might be listening to this. Hi, Lisa. And hi, Anna, if you're listening to this as well. But having that general manager to help ease that load on management and having that one person can make such a difference in a team. Yeah. And I kind of look at it, and I'm even going to, I suppose, ask you the same question. When you've experienced that general management hire and you've got someone that can help you manage the team, that's when team building gets a bit more fun. Yeah. That's when we appreciate it.
Yeah. Just to cap off like my last share, don't get me wrong, I work incredibly hard, and I get a hell of a lot done, more in, a few hours than most people do in a few weeks. But I'm selective around when I choose to work. Like I don't work for the sake of work. Like sometimes I might wake up and not feel in the mood to do anything. So I don't. Like I take myself out, I go for a swim at the beach, surf, whatever. But if I feel like I'm in a flow on a Wednesday night at 7 p.m. after my kids go to bed, I'll jump in and build something out. And I'm kind of more in tune with following through on how I feel about things rather than just forcing myself to do it. Because in the past, I forced myself to work because, I had all this stuff to do and it just wasn't my best work. And to kind of answer the second question you just asked is, like there is a difference between management and leadership. And some people are rock stars at management and some people are amazing at leadership. And I suppose the biggest thing that I've had to learn is that it's okay to have weaknesses. It's okay to not be great at everything. And it's actually okay to pursue what you're good at. And if you're good, I sat down with Anna a month ago and I was like, I don't know how you do what you do and love it. Like she absolutely loves what she does. It gives her a great sense of purpose and inspiration. The team loves her. She's phenomenal in the role. I don't love that. So for me, I can't see how she loves that. But our personality types are very different. Whereas she probably can't see how I enjoy doing what I'm doing so much, how I can live my life the way that I do. And so it's important to make sure that, you do actually have the right people in the right seats on the bus, that we're not Superman, that we do have strengths and weaknesses, and be okay to play in your strengths. The reason that we outsource a lot of things is because people we outsource it to, they love doing what they're doing. They love the video or they love the ad. My VA that's in my email and bookings and stuff, she loves that stuff. She gets a sense of purpose to help me, right? And so I think it's important as a business owner to find out like what drives you, what gives you a sense of purpose, and be okay to actually hire people to do the things that you don't love doing, and realize that there's people out there that would actually really love the things that you hate.
There's so many really good points in there. And I love what you said a lot. We'll get the word love right in there. I love that bit. We love what we do. But even from personal experience, having people in the right seat makes all the difference. And I think all too commonly we forget that, for all the things we don't like doing, there is someone that actually enjoys it. So it's a really interesting thing to analyze. And this is something I really check in with my guys on regularly as well, is you've got to have the right people in the right seat. If you've got an A player or if you've hired a superstar, but you put them in the wrong seat on the bus or get him to do the wrong things, eventually they can become miserable and twisted, really unmotivated, and then they can end up destroying culture and things like that. But on the reverse is like, even if you've got someone that was 80% as good, but they're in the right seat, their motivation, their excitement, like they start bringing through these characteristics that really lift them up and they're excited to be through that. So I'll go into another question here because there's some, fascinating things to discuss on team. What do you think the biggest mistake with team building is?
What's the biggest mistake with team building? I think there's a number of things. I'm just going to reel them off. I think maybe to reframe the question is what is important to team building, so we can find the two. I think number one, you have to have a clear mission or a vision that you're working towards as a team, and making sure that you're constantly aligning that. You need to make sure that you're bringing your team onto the same page. I think the biggest mistake people make is, trying to build a team, but still acting like they're a solopreneur. So trying to build a team that can step up and take on board responsibility, but still doing it all themselves, or being too dictatory. Is that a word? Dictatory around the way that you.
If not, we can create it here. Like we'll get you in the dictionary on that one, Baz.
Yeah, let's totally do that. But one of the biggest things I had to learn with Anna is how to actually hand over and let go, and be okay when there's mistakes. Be okay to realize that she's a human being, that she's learning, and I still make mistakes. But if it's okay for me to make mistakes, it's okay for her to make mistakes. So I think, not being too quick to cut people down. Being okay to provide the environment, being okay to make sure that you hire right in the first place. Like hire over cultural fit as opposed to skill set. Because skills, you can train the right person. You can't. It's very hard to train beliefs and values and culture into somebody. So I think the biggest mistake that people can make is hiring way too quickly, hiring out of a place of scarcity rather than hiring the absolute perfect fit for the role. And I think not having opportunities to regularly connect in with your team. Like, I share everything with my team. Like they know, they could ask me anything about any of the numbers and I openly share everything. They're all on the same page because that's the kind of environment that I want to create. I want to make sure that my team, I can have a transparent conversation with. allow your team to be able to have an open door policy to where they can bring feedback to you. Like as a leader, there's going to be things that you do that is shit. If your team doesn't feel that they can come up to you and have a conversation with you about it, you're not really breeding a phenomenal world-class culture. You're building a culture where it's very dictatorial. There's that word again. And, is not going to breed success, and not going to breed that love and community that you want to in your tribe.
Yeah, that's so many good points once again. And I find that really fascinating, because my number one mistake with team building, or the thing I look at, is very much on the same page, is I see that people hire too quickly and then definitely don't fire quickly enough to actually hold on to it. So I'll give you a really good example. Is like, I speak to a lot of people, obviously through Outsourcing Angel, when it comes to hiring and things like that. And something I notice is how quickly a lot of people are willing to accept the first candidate just to have it over and done with. And it's like...
And then they spend 3 years trying to get that person to be the right fit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm like, this is a really fascinating thing where it's like, if you'd have spent the time to ensure that the right person got in, you would have saved so much time and energy down the road. So my number one thing, absolutely, spend more time making sure someone is the right fit. And then this is something I really want to make people aware of, is that a really good employee is easy to spot, and they're easy to keep, and it's easy to be happy to keep. And in this example here, if I said to you, Baz, are you sure you want to keep Anna? There's no hesitation. You're like, Anna's in. Now, when someone's a terrible employee, so when someone is not the right fit and they're crap at their job, it's really easy to remove them. You go, well, actually, let's get rid of that person. But that's not the danger. The danger is the middle ground.
The B grade players, I was just about to say 100%. They're kind of good enough that you don't want to fire them, but they're not quite bad enough that you want to fire them either.
The most expensive thing and the biggest waste of resources you can create is a team of B players. Nothing will imperil a business more, because you never thrive well enough to cope with growth and to take on the challenges that is small business. And then you never get the guts or courage to remove them to get the A players in, and you just end up with this level of averageness. So dangerous.
I was having a conversation. We ran a live webinar this morning into our members group with Amanda Holmes, the CEO of the Chet Holmes Institute. And we're talking about hiring, like how to hire A-grade salespeople. And the stat is that a bad hire will actually cost you 10 times the annual salary of that hire.
That hurts. 10
times. So you're far better off. Like we just recently, we got to the last stage of interviewing 3 candidates for a certain role. We got down to the last 3, and we made a decision not to hire any of them. Because they just, I'm like, I just don't feel right about them. Let's open up the interview process again.
Well, I'm actually happy to hear that though, Barry, because in what we just said, most business owners would have taken one on.
Totally.
And even 3 people is more than the one interview I see many taking. But even then, you've got to follow through and say, if we've only got B players here, then that's not what we're going to settle for. So I admire you on that one in a big way. So something we've mentioned a few times throughout this conversation is culture. Like culture's come up, the impact it has on culture. So from your point of view, how important is culture, and how do you define culture?
Oh, God. Well, how important, I don't think you can really put a value on it, because, very much what, some of the methodology that we believe in at the Game Changers around the inner game. And the inner game is an alignment between head and heart. And when we talk about heart, we talk about, energetics of a person. And I believe that energetically, the culture that you have within your company, not what people see you post on social media, but energetically how your company acts and what they actually stand for resonates out to the world. And energetically, if you haven't got a thriving culture, your prospects are going to feel that, your clients are going to feel that, and that's going to significantly affect your ability to attract your ideal client, to sell your ideal client, and retain your ideal client, not just to mention your staff themselves. So I think that it's very hard to put a value on it, but I think that it's the most important. I think that if you have a absolutely world-class culture in terms of energetically, you are all in alignment, in congruence, in integrity, and living to your values that you essentially put out to the marketplace, your business is naturally going to grow. The second question on that is, how do you define it? Oh, God, that's a challenging one. I think it comes down to core values. being clear on the core values that are required. Like if you look at your vision as being like the sun, right? The thing that you can always chase but never quite get, and your mission being like the mountain, and then your wigs or your wildly important goals, the path to get there. Your values are kind of the compass. The values are what let you know on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis whether you're on course or off course to achieve your mission and get to your vision. And so I think that it's important to have them, and to the point that whether the business owner is in or out of the company, the business should still articulate and be able to live in accordance with that DNA. To the point that even if you ask your clients, interview your clients, they would be talking in such a way that the values start to come out.
That's a really interesting way of thinking about it. And I tend to agree with a lot of it. And I want to throw this one here in, is like, being that we can agree what culture looks like here, how do you make sure that all your team are a part of the right culture or fit your culture then?
Yeah. Look, two things, I think. First and foremost is, or a couple of things. You need to be clear on what culture you want to create. You need to be clear on what your vision, mission, values are. And they are going to be refined over and over. Like every quarterly planning day, we spend half the day refining our vision, mission, values. And there's less refinement now than what there was in the beginning, because as you notice what shows up in your business in the marketplace, you might change them a little bit to kind of steer things back online with where you want to go. But the hiring, it starts with hiring, as I said before, is that once you're clear of what the end in mind is, you can hire somebody aligned to that culture. But the other big part, the third big part of that is it's just constant reiteration and constant embedding of that. You can't expect to go and run a team planning day where you take everyone bowling and all of a sudden you've got an amazing culture. Like if you want to create a world-class culture, it is like repetition, repetition, repetition. We have a meeting every week, and I'll actively call out my staff if they're not showing up to the meeting in such, I'll even opt out. I'll be like, guys, I'm not signed up for this. I'm going to hop offline. I'm going to come back online in 5 minutes. Make sure you guys live in the values. And I just won't stand for that. So be clear on what that is and constantly re-embed that. We have a few different processes. We have a thing called star charts, where every week our employees vote for, a member of the week, both staff and clients, okay, that we see actively aligning with the values. So it's a constant process of just continuously embedding the standard in which you wish to have in your company. There's a saying that I read recently, and it said that we're not the highest version of ourselves to which we can imagine. We're the lowest version of ourselves to which we can accept. So we will do nothing to create that higher version of ourselves, yet fight like hell not to breach our standards. And so if we want to live a more fulfilling life, if we want to live a life experiencing a higher version of ourselves, we simply need to change our standards and change what we're willing to accept. And that starts with ourselves first. And if we congruently have those beliefs and those values within ourselves, we can then congruently hold our staff accountable for it. Like we can't go and ask our staff to be accountable to something or to live to a certain value if we're first not taking on board ourselves. And sure, we're not perfect, right? But if we're promoting a culture where our staff can also call us out when we're not living to value, it really starts to breed, I think, a phenomenal team and a phenomenal tribe.
Definitely. And I think you've kind of nailed something there really well. Is like, culture isn't going bowling twice a year, or how good your Christmas party is, or if you've got a nap room or a table tennis table or anything like that, or if you do free beer on Friday. Like all those things in many cases can actually be negative for culture, not actually positive. Like one thing I noticed, and I experienced this the most with Outsourcing Angel, is that when we started to really up our game with charity work, so when we started contributing to the Philippines in a bigger way, I noticed that had a huge impact on culture because our team enjoyed the results it produced. So it wasn't about them getting more perks. In fact, a lot of them volunteered their time and energy and resources, so spent more time at work and to help with this thing because they were all aligned on the value of making the world a better place. So it's fascinating that after that experience of how much I appreciate culture and the talent and people we attract at Outsourcing Angels are people who can see that. They do want to align with the mission and the value of the company. So all that comes into play in a really big way. Yeah. The other thing is, I think we really do tend to appreciate culture the bigger a company gets. Like I know when I had a team of 4, it was like, culture, what's that stuff? I'm not even going to, how's this, my biggest struggles are getting more clients. How's this worth me spending my time on? But now on the other side of that is like, the culture is the priority because it's like that's what maintains the flow of the business. That's what keeps everything in check.
It creates an environment of self-selection too. I'm out of a lot of the hiring processes now, and if we get someone that comes through, like you talked about before, like hire slow, fire fast. If we get someone that comes through the game changer is not a perfect fit, usually the team helps to exit them in the first week. I don't need to be involved in that, because we have such a strong culture and DNA and energetic field, you could almost say, in the business, that if someone's in alignment to that, it's very obvious. And equally too, if someone steps out of alignment to that, it's very obvious to the rest of the team to where they could actually call them out on that. And naturally, we're holding ourselves to such a high account that the standard is constantly lifting. But it's not from me driving it. We're driving it now as a team because we've created it as a team.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Now, I want to lead into another question here is that do you believe that A players are born or are they created?
Oh, God. That's a difficult question, Charlie. That's a great question, but difficult question. I think it's created. I think everyone's got the ability to be an A player. It depends whether you want to. We could dive down to a few day long conversation around the psychological that's created and be an A player. The first thing I'd start with is, well, what is an A player in the first place? Like, define what an A player actually is.
High performance team member.
High performance team member, yeah. And, you shared before too, it's often high performance team members get hired, but they're not seen as high performance team members because the environment doesn't support that. So I very much believe that they're born, they're created. Like, we've all got the ability to be one. And it's both a combination of what we'd say the game changers are in a game and our outer game, our environment that creates or allows us to see that high performance A player.
It's interesting. I do agree this could go for a few days if we were just going to discuss this topic. Because what's interesting to me is like an A player in a poor environment will burn out really quickly and won't perform well. Could in fact perform worse than people that are B or C players, from what I've seen.
Charlie, surely you've had experiences too, though. Like, I don't know about you, but certainly for me, and maybe for the guys out there, where I've had a team member who I believed was an A player until I hired somebody else. And I'm like, holy shit, they're a B player. This is an A player. And I found that for a couple of years is that as we kept making hiring decisions, we kept on hiring better and better quality staff. Now, they are real people, but you understand what I'm saying, right, is that, we started making these hiring decisions, which allowed us to lift the bar higher to see that the people we actually had either had a greater capacity or that they're at full capacity and that their capacity was just simply sitting around that middle line we spoke about before.
Oh, now we're getting into the meat and potatoes end of this type of podcast. So I'll reference a few things. One, yes, 100% is that as you get more experience, like, you can't ever describe something you haven't experienced.
Yeah.
So it's like if you've never had ice cream, or let's say you've had vanilla ice cream, but you've never had cookies and cream. You might think vanilla is the best in the world, but then you have cookies and cream and you said, maybe vanilla is not so good anymore. Yeah. And we keep experiencing that with stuff. So as we develop and we learn more, as we can see what's really possible. A really good example of this is like I was going to the gym, and earlier this year I was doing 100 kilo calf races, and I thought I was, hitting a bit. And then this monster came in the gym and did 200. And I was like, wow, I am not playing at that level. And the same is true with team.
Yeah.
The other thing I've found to be very true, which gets ignored, is we may hire an A player, and depending on the environment or how comfortable they get, is they can sag off. So they might have been an A player and then they're dragging down gradually. And then we hire a new A player and then we notice that A to B gap. So like we might have had an A player originally that turned into a B player, but people get comfortable, lazy, they maybe unfulfilled, not in the right seat. Whole variety of factors could contribute to that, which comes through from there. Something that also comes really, really interesting to my point of view is that if you're seen as someone that doesn't fire people, like your team doesn't change regularly and someone feels very comfortable in a position, or you don't hire regularly, or you're not willing to have hard conversations with your team will actually take advantage of you and start to try and do the minimal possible to get through the weeks. And over time, you will actually lower your expectations subconsciously.
Yeah.
So
that's why a lot of the large companies replace their CEO every 12 to 18 months to keep that fresh insight coming through. And I think that, like it really comes down to three things. I think number one is belief, like the beliefs that we carry about ourselves as a business owner or the employees or contractors carry about themselves and what they're capable of. I think the second one is standards that we hold. We spoke about before, like the standards, like as you hire a new player and they come in up here, the standards of the company and what's accepted increases. And I think the third part we spoke about is environment that they're coming from and they're coming into. They've got the ability to, if they come from a murky environment into a great environment that actually lifts the spirit of them and they're wanting to succeed and do better because they're really appreciating the job. But also, if you've got a negative or a toxic environment, it could take them back down the other way as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's some very famous hedge funds, which I won't go into very interestingly, but it's quite noted that they fire their bottom 10% of analysts. Yeah. So if you're managing a portfolio and you perform in the bottom 10% of the company, your job's gone.
Gonski, yeah.
Yeah, so if you accept that low end, you're gone. And at this other end of the table, if you're in the top 10%, is like stupid level bonuses. So as much as I don't like, I think that's a bit extreme in some cases, but you can certainly see what some companies are putting in place to protect the level of talent and what's the minimum standard, required is you've got to be over that line.
Yeah.
Now, Barry, our episode is coming to the end here. Where can people go to find out more about you?
Look, the best way is www.thegamechanges.com.au. You can find us on Facebook. You can join our free group, Mastering the Game. Or you can look me up, Barry Magliarditi, Magliarditi.
I've just realised I've pronounced your name horribly wrong at the start of the episode. I thought I knew it as well, which is even worse.
I thought we were friends, but that's okay.
I'm so sorry, Barry. I'll work on
first name basis.
Well, that's it for this episode, guys. I'll make sure to put some links in on the back of this so you can go and check out the fantastic work Barry does at the Game Changers. Certainly one of the masters of high performance and really understanding, I suppose, the inner game and changing people's game. So that's it for this episode. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much, Barry. Have a great day.
Thanks, Charlie.